My name is Colin Marston. How's it going? And you are listening to the Brutally Delicious Podcast.
The Brutally Delicious Podcast presents Behind the Desk.
Hello.
Colin.
Yes.
Hey, Bruce Moore. I got my partner Chris on the line. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Good. Thanks for joining us. Where are you at? You're in Brooklyn now?
Queens, actually. But yeah, close enough.
What's the scene like in Queens these days?
I pretty much stay in my studio and then go to the park every now and then, and that's about it. I haven't left my neighborhood since March. So I don't know. It's it's a neighborhood in New York.
Yeah,
there's a lot of people, but it's one of the better ones. I like being here, and the proximity to the park makes for like a nice balance of the super urbanness of it.
Right. No, I get it. I'm originally from Valley Stream, which is not too far from where you're at.
Oh yeah, right on. Some of my buddies from Artificial Brain are from Valley Stream.
Oh wow!
And actually, one of my studio interns is from there too.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I've been out of there for like 30 years now, but I'm originally from Valley Stream.
Cool.
I bet you it's changed a little in 30 years.
No, I'm sure it's exactly the same.
Oh yeah. So
well, anyway,
are you managing to stay fairly busy right now?
With work, you mean, or just sort of like in life?
With recording or mixing? Or...
Yeah, well, yes and no. So, as of March, I stopped doing attended sessions, so I haven't had a single person in the studio in 6 or 7 months. And at the time, it was really scary because I'm usually booked 3-4 months in advance, like pretty much every single day, and so having like that much work drop away all at once was pretty terrifying. But the good news is that like a couple of those records that where I was supposed to have the whole band here, they just turned into remote recordings with people like doing what they could at home, or like I was supposed to record a band from Denver, so they weren't going to come out here anymore, but they were able to go to a local studio in a safe way and track it there, and then I still got to mix it. So even like with Malignancy, like a local New York band, that went from them coming into the studio to then me doing a consultation with Ron to set him up to record at home, and then send me tracks to edit and reamp. So, some of that work I was able to salvage. Other records just still haven't been done, like the Artificial Brain. And then some other stuff just got canceled. But the good news is that all the remote work is still very much in effect. So mastering is pretty much always remote anyway. And half the time I'm working with bands that are from, Singapore or Belarus or Italy or whatever anyway. So they're not going to be coming in the first place. So that's still there. And then like, I'm just getting maybe, I'm not going to say a higher percentage, but just enough mixing work and mastering work to stay afloat.
Well, that's good news.
It's been like a lot of lost work, but also a lot of sort of unexpected last minute work.
Yeah,
and at least enough for now.
Yeah, have you looked into the Audio Movers Listen To plugin?
No, I'm not sure what that is.
Okay, so it allows you to stream lossless WAV files over the internet. So okay. I don't know, are you using Pro Tools or what are you using?
I use Logic.
Logic, yeah, it works in Logic too. So basically what happens is you open up this plugin on a track, so you can put it on your master fader or any other track, and it streams based on your internet connection. So like if your internet connection is slow, you'll have to choose a lower bit rate to go, but you can stream 24-bit 48K files straight over the internet if your internet can keep up. And you can actually, I've done sessions this way during COVID, where someone's, say, in Vancouver, Canada, and I'll be like, okay, let's track this, and I can produce from afar because I can listen in my session and record it in my session while they're also playing and recording in their session.
That's cool. No, I haven't looked into anything like that. I mean, the thing is, because even before the pandemic, I was doing a lot of remote work too. I mean, yeah, I don't really know what it boils down to in terms of percentage of like attended versus non-attended, but I've gotten pretty used to working both ways. So it's not like I only like to work where I'm like with the person, you know, giving them feedback in the moment. Like I'm happy to work on recordings also where like I just give all that trust to the musician. They do their thing and then they just send me it. And you know, some of the times I get stuff to work on that's pretty horribly engineered, like the thing I'm working on right now. It's a terribly engineered recording. I won't name any names. It's a cool record. The music's great. And the thing is, it doesn't, like, ruin the record that it's badly engineered. Like, I'm able to salvage it enough, and it's kind of got a garagey vibe, so it's sort of okay. But, yeah, I think the thing is, like, I'm kind of used to that. So it's like if it's a situation where like it really is a problem, I'll tell the band and then they'll decide whether to redo it or not. But it's kind of cool. I think it's actually in a way kind of good to like force yourself to be a little bit more open to like a wider variety of types of recordings and of like standards of engineering. Because you know, like in the past, like I used to get really, really bothered when somebody would bring something in that was badly engineered or badly edited. And then I kind of realized, like, well, I'm, like, really under the microscope with this shit. So if I was somebody just hearing a record that was badly recorded, and I listen to badly recorded records all the time, it doesn't have the same impact and weight if you're just a listener than if you're, like, you know, getting paid to work on it and make it sound flawless.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. A good friend of mine always says that music is about art and culture, you know, and if
absolutely
there's a certain threshold that you have to cross to make it listenable, but once you cross that threshold, the rest is just gravy.
Right.
You know, like,
and the thing is, that's such a personal thing, like what that threshold is. It's almost subjective enough to not even exist as like a concrete line, right? So if that's the case, then it's like that line could kind of be in a wide variety of places depending on who you are.
Oh, absolutely.
And, you know, and aesthetics plays into it too. I mean, for certain types of music, you don't really want like a squeaky clean recording. Yeah, maybe you don't want to hear like a pop from a bad edit or something. But even if that's in there, maybe half the people won't notice it and it won't like ruin the song. So even at its worst, I feel like, you know, bad recordings, whatever you want to call bad, isn't necessary. It's never going to be bad for everybody, I guess is what I'm saying.
I think too, with bad recordings, it's really cool from a mixer's point of view, where you really have to kind of challenge yourself to get it to a point where you feel you've crossed a threshold. And and you're forced to do things that maybe you wouldn't normally do, you know? So
Totally. Yeah, I end up doing a lot more processing on mixes where the recording is kind of shitty. And, you know, if I just kind of like being the kind of guy where when I have the control in my studio, I like to, you know, get the best, take the best picture of the sound, so to speak, I can, and then not fuck with it that much after the fact, you know, because that's the ideal. But hey, you're right. Like if you get something that's kind of fucked up sounding and you end up putting a lot of work into it to get it to a place where you think it sounds cool, then there's like a certain degree of like triumph and growth in that, and just forcing yourself to do things differently and not always do something the same way, so that when you're faced with something a little bit different, you're not like, oh, I don't know what to do.
Oh yeah, it's insane. It's also given me a lot of ideas for new plugins. But anyways.
Nice. You mean like plugins that don't exist that you sort of imagine like, oh, I'm always doing this. I wish I had a plugin that did that.
Yeah. Like for instance, I'm sure you've run into this in your travels where you get a guitar track and there's nothing you can do to it. Like it's just totally fucked. And
right.
You have the DI track and it still sucks. And there's like and it's played fine, it's played well, but like the pickup is fucked or just something's wrong. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like it's full of ground hum or like just the radio interference or something.
It's super harsh or
super, just the tone is bad. Sure.
Yeah. So like I have this Axe.io interface and it has an impedance changer on it. So it's a variable impedance knob, so you can go from high impedance to low impedance, but anywhere in between. And I was like, how am I going to deal with this guitar? I threw every plugin I had at it because the amp sound was completely unusable. I was like, I don't know what to do. So I actually just took the line output out and threw it into the DI and changed the impedance, and it was like, fuck, that works so good. So
wow, that's so cool.
And that's not something I would have ever thought of unless, you're faced with that situation.
Unless you were kind of like at your wit's end and you were like, well, nothing I've done works. I'm going to try something I've never tried before.
Yeah. So like, what's one thing that you've had to go through like that, where you've been forced to try something that you haven't done before?
Oh man, I feel like there should be like a really good example right on the tip of my brain because the second you said that, I was like, oh, I've totally been there, but I'm trying to think of a good example. I mean, the record I'm working on right now is kind of a weird situation where like, there's two guitarists, and in one song I might have in the same track a combination of different amp sounds, levels, DIs, all thrown together. So I guess that's more not like, oh no, I need a new approach. That's more like, okay, I have to like go through, separate the different amps and the DIs, reamp the DIs through an amp that I have, and then go in and like use kind of extreme EQing and gating and so on to like, try to remove ground hum from this one part where this one amp was kind of fucked, or maybe they were using like a single coil pickup for one part of the riff, going through with a gain plugin and automating all the changes where like they clearly like punched in on different days with different levels, things like that. So yeah, I've definitely done some along those lines. I remember there was another record I did. I don't get into this kind of shit too much anymore with drum sound replacing, but I got like a really garagey recording of a drum kit with 4 toms, but he only used 2 mics. So the 2 rack toms shared a mic and the 2 floor toms shared a mic. So what I had to do to be able to sound replace them was to go through, listen to every drum fill, and the guy was constantly doing drum fills, and separate the 2 toms of each pair, and then kind of go in with the Drumagog plugin and like automate the threshold for basically every drum hit so that it wasn't like double triggering or missing hits. And then I think I had like 2 layers of Drumagogs because I had one that was sort of like a close mic and one that was sort of a room mic, so I could get a kind of a natural sound. Anyway, that was a long time ago, and at this point I'd probably just be like, all right, let me oh, you know what? I have a great example for your question I just thought of. Imperial Triumphant's record Abyssal Gods was a record where like I had recorded them in the studio a couple times, and then for that record they decided to sort of do it themselves, and they tracked the drums at their drummer's house. And, he's an amazing drummer, but a terrible engineer. And, or at least at the time, maybe he's gotten better. But, like, the editing was bad. There was, like, like the snare drum was just like a square wave. Like something had gone wrong, like in the preamp or something, and nobody noticed. So it was kind of so fucked up sounding, but the music of that band is very sort of fucked up and uncomfortable and dissonant. So I was like, all right, instead of trying to clean this up, let's go the other way and make this record sound just horrid. Just like, let's distort everything more and just get a really extreme, bizarre, uncomfortable, very like wrong sounding tone to the album. That was a lucky situation because it really fit the music. If it was like a country pop record that was for the radio and, trying to get a hit single, probably wouldn't be the vibe. Although that would be pretty fucking interesting, wouldn't it?
Let's send this
We chatted with those guys just recently with their new record.
Say again?
We chatted with the Imperial Triumphant just recently on their new release, or newest release.
Oh, I'm sorry. What about the new album?
We chatted with them recently when they were.
Oh, cool. Excellent.
Yeah, they're nice guys.
Yeah, I love that band. I've actually been working with them pretty much from the beginning. And like I said, gotten to do kind of everything from having them in the studio. Like for the last 2 records, it was the whole band in the studio, and I got to do everything from the ground up. but there was sort of a middle period where they were doing a lot of the home recording, and that was sort of the weird sounding records.
Right.
But in retrospect now, it's really cool that happened, because it's like I never would have, like you said before, like I never would have arrived at a record that would sound quite like that if it hadn't had that whole backstory, and we just sort of like decided, okay, let's go into some uncharted territory and try to get something that's like, let's focus more on unique and scary than like, proper.
Right. That makes sense.
I'm going to change topics here for a second. What's your approach to drum recording? How do you, like, for instance, I mean, most people close mics fairly similar, but what about like overheads? Are you looking more for a picture of the drum kit with your overheads? Are you using like space pair? Are you doing left, center, right? How do you approach the overheads on your drum kits?
It's I would say it's not the same every time, but if I had like a go-to, it's usually a pair of Coles 4038s for my overheads.
Nice.
And I usually have them pointed either kind of straight up and down or a little bit, like, how do I say this? A little bit like out, like almost like it's a super wide ORTF that's at less than 110 degree angle.
Gotcha.
Because the thing is, with those figure eights, you have the nulls on the side. So if I want to like widen the stereo image, I can kind of like angle the mics out towards the sides of the kit a little bit more and cut, the bleed from the other side. But the thing is, you don't get like a super, super clean stereo image with those mics anyway, because they are figure eight and they pick up from the back. So they get a fair amount of room sound in there too, which kind of blurs the left and the right. So that's kind of good, because I also, with those mics, I have a pretty live sounding live room. So I like to get in fairly close with them. Not I don't have them like 5 feet above the cymbals. They're like, maybe 2 feet from the cymbals or 3 feet or something.
Man,
and the thing is, it depends on the size of the kit too. Like you were saying, like, do I do left, center, right? Sometimes I will do a center, or like if the drummer has like high crashes on either side, but then has like a bunch of splashy small cymbals like right over the toms, I might come in with some close mics there. It kind of just depends on, like, I just eyeball it and I see what stuff is far from any mic, and then maybe add another one.
That's cool. I've never tried figure eights as overheads before. I was using KM 184s for years, just small diaphragm condensers, and they were fine and whatever. And then when I got the Coles, I was just like, oh my God, what have I been doing? And never went back, pretty much. That's amazing.
They're just so much sort of thicker sounding. I end up having to roll out a little bit of low end sometimes because I don't have a huge room. But they're just fucking perfect for what I like. They're never brittle, never harsh. Even with added top end and stuff. And I'm usually also spot miking the ride and the hat with the KM184. So those end up being very bright, but I have them pretty low in the mix with the Coles, as the main overheads. So
I
always have room mics too.
I was just going to ask, do you ever use your recorded hat track?
Yeah, it's always real low in the mix, and if it's mostly open hat, maybe I wouldn't even use it at all. I mean, it's the lowest thing in the mix, period. But then every now and then, with certain drummers, you get, like some intricate closed hi-hat stuff, and that's where it comes in handy. Or even sometimes you can just get a slightly crisper stereo image of the cymbals if you sneak it in there. Like you barely even hear it, but it just kind of gives a little bit of definition. I'm always talking shit about sound guys miking the hi-hat. It's like the third thing. It's like, I don't know if we can mic the bass cab. I'm like, you're fucking miking the hi-hat. Come on. Yeah, the whole bass player isn't important, but this one instrument that's the loudest thing in the room, let's get a mic on that.
Yeah, and From a production point of view, how do you deal with hat bashers?
I don't know. I've never had a huge problem with it when I'm mixing for whatever reason. Certain recordings that I've gotten from other people, yes, maybe, but I don't know. Like, I look at some other drummers that are using like crazy ways to sort of isolate the hat from the rest of the kit or whatever, but I don't know, for some reason it's never been one of my personal like main struggles as an engineer. I got plenty of other ones.
You're very lucky.
Yeah, I mean, sure it's an issue. Yeah, I recognize it, but it's just like for whatever, it's like there's certain things that you pull your hair out about as an engineer that really just get to you, and for some reason that's just not high on the list. Yeah, in general, the washiness of cymbals annoys me, but I tend to get more annoyed by like washing out on like crashing on the ride cymbal for like 5 minutes at a time, or just constant crashing than I do by hi-hats for whatever reason.
Then you'll never want to make a drum sample library if that bothers you.
I've done that too.
Oh my God.
So yeah, I don't know. It's like I've got such a love for that instrument, for the drum kit, that it's like when you go so deep with it, you kind of end up you have to have a love-hate relationship with it after a while. Same with guitar, with distorted guitar. It's like, it's the best sound ever, and it's the fucking hardest thing ever to mix. And then you combine distorted guitar and fucking crash cymbals, and it's like, it's all over. It's impossible.
Yeah. It's just, distorted guitar is just like this wall that covers everything, but it has to be, it has to be there. It's because it's so beautiful.
It has to be like articulate and kind of a wall of noise at the same time. And then you have the other wall of noise that's the drum kit, and the other wall of noise that's the death metal vocals, and the other wall of noise that's the bass, and nobody ever rests.
Yeah. How do you approach bass? Are you a DI or an amp person, or do you combine? How do you deal with that?
I often will record DIs for guitar and bass, but just for reamping. I hardly ever use a DI in the mix in the traditional way. I actually end up using DI guitar for like special effects way more than DI bass. I don't think I've like ever used DI bass on a record, except for like on a rock record. Maybe like for there's weird experimental examples for like reggae or something like that, like something more like hip hop close, adjacent or something where you want it to almost sound like a synthesizer. But in general, I'm very much an amp guy, and I'm also a little bit opposed to amp simulators. I definitely like use them for demos, and I use them for certain things where it makes more sense. But it's like, if I can use an amp, I'll use an amp. I'm just really into like miking and that whole side of recording.
Oh, I'm with you. I started my recording career in like a world-class studio in Vancouver, British Columbia, and
cool.
Just the ability to mic and have mics and deal with the real world of recording, Like the first thing I noticed when I went to your website is that you had a tape machine. And every time I see a tape machine, I have nightmares because that's how I started. But there's something about tape machines because you had to listen. You were an engineer, not an engine eye, if that makes any sense.
I like that.
So are you still working on tape and then transferring to Logic? Or are you recording through the tape to Logic? How are you dealing with that?
My website is actually super out of date, and I don't work on tape anymore. But I had a long period of having the basic way I worked would be to do the basic tracking to tape, the 24 track. And I had a Sony at first, and then that machine got kind of too unreliable, and then I got the fucking Studer 800, which were just awesome. So anyway, I would do the basic tracking to tape, dump the reel to the computer. And at that point, I think I was mostly recording 15 inches per second. So I would at least get like 32 minutes on a reel, as opposed to the little 16 minutes before you have to, that would get pretty pretty difficult sometimes with bands with long songs, and you want to do 2 takes, and then all of a sudden you do a false start and you're out of room, and then you got to erase the tape, and that machine didn't erase as well as the Sony, so I actually had to go back and erase and then record. Like I had to basically record silence before I would do another recording over top of it, or sometimes you'd hear it bleeding through. But yeah, vocals and overdubs I'd pretty much just do digitally, and I pretty much always mixed digitally. Like ever since I moved from 4-track cassette to a computer, I was like, oh, computer mixing is the way. And I mean like in the box.
Yeah.
Like no summing, no. I think I tried, mixing on my console once or twice, and it just was like, what's the point? I didn't really have a snazzy console anyway. It was just a Tascam. It was more for routing signal, doing headphone mixes. And I don't know. It's just like that's the way I've always worked, is in a computer. I grew up with Macintoshes. I'm comfortable with them. I'm fine sitting there clicking a mouse a billion times a day. Like, that's fine. And the thing is, like, having the ability of total recall of all settings and being able to come back to a mix whenever, not having to like leave a mix up on the board and like up on all your outboard gear and stuff until it's done, and then you have no ability to kind of come back and pick up where you left off. That's just necessary for me, because I don't live in a universe where I can just like make one record every 3 months.
Yeah.
Like I need to be working on 10 records at a time all the time.
Right.
In order to like pay the bills. Like that's just the way it is. And then, plus bringing in the music that I want to make for my own shit. I want to be working on that at the same time. I don't want to like wait to finish somebody else's record until they've decided it's done just to be able to like use my amp again. Like, no.
That's the thing that I found, after because I grew up mixing on like SSL desks or whatever. And then I started mixing in Pro Tools, and I just was like, oh man, this is so good. And then I was asked to go back and mix on a desk, and I just was like, holy shit, this slowed me way down. Like I couldn't work as fast. I couldn't do the things I want. I couldn't make decisions as quickly as I wanted to.
Sure.
So I always
sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think it all comes down to what you're used to. You can get used to anything. So it's like if I did live in a world where it was possible to do things the old school way, and I started doing that, maybe I'd just really get into it and just be like, oh, I can't imagine. Like, what the hell was I doing trying to mix 10 records at the same time? That's ridiculous. Like, how can I keep my attention span like that? But it's like, whatever. That's a skill I've developed now. But if I wasn't developing that skill, I'd be developing a different, right? So, yeah, you never know. But I got to say that ability to multitask, so to speak, and to come back to things, it's not just good for me. It's good for the clients too. I mean, like, yes, at a certain point you need to say something's done, and you don't want to like be mixing your record for the rest of your life. But the thing is, like, they're having to pay me to do that anyway. So there are deterrents built in from like spending forever working on a record.
Yeah, a mix is never done until you run out of time, money, or both.
Yeah, I mean, and isn't it just better to like, just in all things in life, but especially with something like music, just like do your best. Don't shortchange yourself. Don't like half-ass it, but do your best. And then once that's done, move on and learn from that experience. Don't like re-record your first album 10 times. Like, what are you going to learn from that? Like, why don't you just write a different song?
Yeah,
and inform that song by like what the last record was like, and then just get into that journey and embrace that. And you'll just, I don't know, you'll get a lot more done, and I think you'll be happier if you tend to be on that side of things rather than to like, oh, I didn't get this one thing perfect.
I remember reading an interview.
There's no such thing as perfect. It's fucking the arts. There's no perfect or imperfect. It just is what it is.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I remember reading an interview with Bruce Sweetin, and he said that they had mixed "Beat It" by Michael Jackson over 100 times.
I read that article too.
And they used like mix number 2 or 3.
It was number 2. That's right. And dude, that was when it was all on fucking half-inch tapes.
Yeah,
so they got the stack of mixes.
Yeah, they couldn't even take the mix down. You know, like they were just revising and like how many weeks did that take? My God.
Oy, oy, oy. Yeah, I mean, I just can't imagine that was a healthy experience for anyone involved. And think about all the money that was sort of wasted. And I mean, it's like you could be like, all right, well, yeah, the studio got paid for all that time, but it's just like, wouldn't it have been cooler if they made 7 other albums in the meantime? And I don't know.
I imagine working on that record, and then you're like, oh, finally, it's done. I don't have to listen to it anymore. And then it's Thriller, and that's the only thing that you hear for the next like 2 years.
Right, you can't ever escape it. Yeah, that's the ironic thing about like, you know, something like the Black Album, or you know, it's like you spend so much time and money on it, and then it's just like, oh, now you can't ever escape this song.
Never.
The rest of your life. All of humanity has to listen to Enter Sandman on repeat until we die.
That's awesome.
That's great.
Bruce, do I have time for one more?
You got time for one more? I emailed people and told them we're a little behind. So
I'm just really enjoying this conversation.
No, that's fine. We got about 5 more.
What's your approach to tracking guitars? Like, are you a 57 421 guy? How do you kind of go about it?
Right on. So one fun fact is that I don't own an SM57 and never have.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm kind of a little weird when it comes to mics. I'm like a kind of I'm not going to say I only use ribbons, but I use a lot of ribbons and a lot of condensers and not that much dynamic mic. I did get I have a Sennheiser 441. I don't have any 421s either. And the 441 was kind of my favorite guitar mic for a while, but then I started moving more in the direction of doing like a ribbon and a condenser. And then, I don't know, I do all sorts of different things. Like the reamping I was doing just now, I was just only doing a condenser on the Fender Twin. For like heavy, like death metal guitars, I've kind of been getting into doing a pair of Royer 122, the active ribbon. Actually having the guitar kind of quiet. And then blending the active ribbon with a Sennheiser 409, like the old discontinued gold one.
Oh my God, that is, don't even get me started. That's like my favorite mic.
Yeah, that's such a cool pair because the 409 is like all mids and high mids with like no lows and no super highs. And the 122 has this really rich low mid range and this very pleasant high end. And you can kind of EQ the shit out of it. And so as a pair, they kind of give you these very contrasting signals, which really blend together. So yeah, to kind of like answer your question, I like doing combinations of mics a lot, and I don't use SM57s. and another thing I like doing a lot, so I like doing this when I'm recording like a full metal band, let's say. Everybody plays live together in the live room. And I have everybody's amps in ISO booths. I have 3 ISO booths here at the studio and then a live room. So I could record like a quartet with everybody isolated. And then for each of the maybe 2 guitars and bass, I'll mic the amp with 1 or 2 mics and I'll take a DI. And then that way, if we don't get exactly the sound we want with the live tracking, I'll just either throw out the sound of the live take, but get the live performance and then reamp it and spend as long as we want. And a lot of times I'll run guitar through 2 amps. I'll do like a cleaner amp and a heavy distorted amp together, or 2 different kind of heavy distorted amps, like a scoop death metal tone and like a more modern mid-rangey tube amp together. So yeah, I really like doing like combinations of tones to make a tone, rather than doing lots of overdubs. I do, overdubs are cool too, but like, rather than like tracking a part 6 times, I'd rather do like one awesome performance through 2 amps a lot of the time.
Gotcha.
Well, cool.
Thank you for taking the time with us. I could take this conversation all day long.
Oh yeah, man, this engineering shit, don't even get me started. It's like, somebody will come up to me after a show and be like, ask me some engineering questions. Like, I'm so sorry, I don't want to waste. I'm like, dude, I could fucking talk about this shit all day.
That's kind of why we started this spin-off from our regular podcast, and we've been talking to producers along the way. And I didn't get much chance to talk this time, thanks to Chris. But sorry. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Throw him under the bus there.
He always does.
But I learned a lot, and I appreciate you taking the time, man.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I told you we wouldn't take too much of your time, but you still have time to get your appointment, right?
Oh, totally. Yeah. It's not for another hour.
Okay, great. Thank you for taking the time. I appreciate it.
You guys rule. Thanks so much.
You too, man.
I'll send you a link when it's up.
Okay. Cheers.
Right. Yeah. Cheers.
Bye.